Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lanes, the podcast where we explore the art and science of leadership in today's dynamic world. I'm your host, Abhijit, and today we have an exciting topic that I believe will resonate and benefit startup founders: decoding revenue operations and its trust with data. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Ruchi Soparkar. She's a founder of ipick.ai, a Gen AI powered stock investment platform. She previously led revenue operations and marketing companies like PayPal, GE, WooCommerce, and many startups. She has an MBA from NC and a BA from Johns Hopkins University. Welcome to the episode, Ruchi.
Thank you, Abhijit.
So let's dive in, right? I was doing some research on RevOps in general, and a quick Google search presented a lot of articles, a lot of websites. One common theme that I noticed was that each website had a different notion or a different meaning of RevOps, and I'll just pinpoint the Forbes article that I went through on revenue operations. And what I got from that is RevOps tries to solve the classic silos in organization problem. Is my basic understanding correct? And can you elaborate on that further?
Yeah, so Forbes is right. It does break down the silos. But what's important to note is truly RevOps exist to help the organization deliver on revenue, which is admittedly one of the most important metrics for any company. And the reason why do we need to have RevOps is, as you know, every organization would strive for a higher revenue growth every year. So it automatically forces them to do things that they have never done before. So when you're taking those risks, you really need to plan well. You need to have data and monitoring in place to see whether are your hypotheses correct? Are you on the right track? So RevOps enables the company to plan, to execute, monitor, pivot, whatever it takes to get to the revenue. So in that process, when you're aligning the organization on a metric, you automatically break down the silos because you are not just focused on the metrics that just matters to your team.
That's an interesting take, actually. And one more interesting aspect that the article discusses is the fact that the RevOps role or the function is continuously evolving, right? What is your take on this? And can you talk us about the evaluation cycle at a high level of this function or the role? And also, can you start off by talking about revenue cycle? You mentioned revenue in the previous answer, previous response. So can you start off by talking about revenue cycle as well?
Yeah. I mean, revenue cycle is a very simple concept from the definition, right? But it's a very important one. So revenue cycle is nothing but what's your current state? How are you driving revenue today? So what's your start and what's your end? And the reason why that's important to note is because that gives you the current state that you can improve on. So for example, if you're selling to an enterprise customer, maybe your start is when you're starting to generate leads, and then you take those leads further in the process, then you convert them, then you get to an order, but then you fulfill the order that actually takes you to revenue. And there are milestones along the way that we want to measure. So that's technically revenue cycle. Going back to your previous point about how things have changed, yes, I mean, of course, they have changed and they'll continue changing. And the reason for that is how we operate and how we serve our customers and what customers want from us keep on evolving. And RevOps is in a service of all that. So what I mean by that is, if we just take a pause and look at how we have evolved as customers, we definitely demand higher level of service. We want fulfillment right away. We want higher quality. And it's just not the product itself, it's the overall experience. Like we are just more demanding as customers. And of course, so the rest of the population is more demanding as well. That, of course, puts a pressure on the team that is serving these customers. But these teams have also evolved. Now with hybrid or remote work, we are not just sitting in one office and trying to brainstorm how to best serve this specific set of customers. We are global, we are distributed. I feel like the evolution of technology and AI and tools are also kind of forcing the teams to create a little bit more of silos. And it's kind of debatable, but what I mean is that we have very niche tools and data set now. So you automatically try to look at that for your specific function. For example, when I was running marketing, I was really laser focused on how my team is doing, which automatically makes me focused on my team versus the overall revenue KPI. So some of those factors have definitely challenged RevOps, but it also has kind of established the importance of RevOps. So now, rather than having just sales, marketing, customer success, optimizing their individual functions, how can they come together and deliver on revenue and optimize that as one metric?
That's an interesting take, actually. A couple of follow-ups on that. First, on the aspect of cross-functional KPIs or cross-functional data points that you talked about, right? And this, I believe, goes back to the silos question again. Do you see, again, from a startup's perspective and from an enterprise or from an established enterprise perspective, do you see a difference in the approach of RevOps when you're dealing with startups as opposed to when you're dealing with established enterprises when it comes to cross-functional integrations or even cross-functional analytics to an extent?
Yeah, and I'll give an example of each. So that's an excellent question, by the way. Revenue is a complex metric, no matter what size of a company you are, but for different reasons. So, for example, when I was at an enterprise company and we were about $1 billion in revenue, our challenge was that we were loved by our existing customers. They were renewing, they were liking what they were doing. But because of that, or because of other reasons too, we were not doing as well on the new logos. And that kind of challenged our revenue mix. And that was, from a long-term perspective, was challenging our revenue as a kind of a healthy growth metric. So we really brought like RevOps to help us figure out this challenge. So how do you drive new logos for an established company? And that started by looking at, okay, who are the lookalike customers that would be interested in our product and our offering? So we came up with a very finite set of customers. We further filtered them down by who was ready to buy right now. How do we know? Like, have they talked about that in their recent earnings reports or on their YouTube videos? So what's the information out there that gives us some indication that it's the right time to reach out to them? How should we be organized as a team? Who reaches out to who? What is the messaging? What's the sequencing of that messages? What is the interim milestones on conversions that we would like to set in front of us? And how do we make it challenging for our team, but not really burdening, right? So there is a fine line there. So you have to lead with empathy. You're doing difficult things together. So anyway, so RevOps played a very different role on driving new logo challenge for these established companies versus for startup. The challenges are very different. Here the teams are doing things that they have never ever done before. They are usually up against an incumbent. They're usually up against some other startups who are claiming to be like them, don't have resources, definitely don't have time. And so in that case, pausing and planning a little bit, although it sounds very difficult, is very required. And this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is really working backwards from what you need to get done this year to what it means to do daily on a weekly basis. So I'll give you a very direct example. So I was helping a startup and they had two design partners or two early customers that they were working with, and they had less than 300K in recurring revenue. And they had to grow 3 times in 12 months. And to do that, they needed about 10 more customers. And if you were to put that aggressive target and then break it down on how many leads they need to have in their CRM by tomorrow, it becomes a very challenging equation. It's almost daunting, but that's required to do then to decide with my limited resources who I must hire, or how the CEO's priority shifts. How does the existing team chips in? When the sales team goes for that one conversation, are they fully equipped to have that conversation? If not, what needs to happen? How do you showcase the product and the demo in a more customized way to your prospect? So there are all these questions that come up, and they don't have that current state of revenue cycle. So you have to define what good looks like for you from scratch, kind of in a hypothesis fashion. So it's a long answer to your question, but just to kind of summarize that, what I meant to say is that RevOps ties to revenue. Revenue is important to any size of the company. So depending on where you are, what stage, it's really just kind of pausing and thinking about, do I know where I am today? Do I know where I want to be in X much timeline? And in that case, how do I mobilize my troops with the resources that I have at hand to deliver on that target? And if something doesn't feel right, then you need to maybe revise the target or do something to make sure that it makes sense to you.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, coming back to the revenue cycle again, so just to educate myself and the viewers as well, right? How does the revenue cycle differ from a general fiscal cycle? Because when we talk about revenue, we typically talk in terms of the fiscal year or the financial year. And are these two the same? Or do you think the revenue cycle is probably different in a lot of terms than the fiscal cycle?
So revenue cycle is different from your fiscal, which is your accounting measurement of your business. It's true, though, that your revenue goals are derived from what you need to achieve within a fiscal year. But the cycle, how long it takes you to get to that revenue number, will be different, and it depends on the complexity of your business. So most likely, say you're serving an enterprise customer, usually, based on what I have seen, your sales cycles is about 6 to 7 months, and your revenue cycle is even longer because revenue cycle ends when you actually recognize the revenue. So it depends on how long after the sales cycle ends, you have to do that fulfillment and then receive the funds and then book the revenue. So that is your revenue cycle. Did you have any other question? Did I answer the question?
No, I guess that answers my question. Yeah. Moving on to the next question, right? So seems like all roads lead to data analytics these days, right? I mean, with the recent advancements of AI and machine learning, what is your take on its role in RevOps, and what do you think future lies with these Gen AI tools and ML tools coming along? How would RevOps shape in near future?
Yes. I love data. Like without data, I don't think RevOps can exist, or I don't know how you can really solve complex problems in a business. So data to me is like oxygen for a business. But I don't think that data has to be perfect either. So there is kind of a balance between how much do you want to analyze it. So to me, if it's directionally correct, then it's good enough for you to make decisions and move forward. And I'm not talking about accounting data. I'm talking about the RevOps data, just to be clear. Now, in terms of data and RevOps, I mean, CRM is, of course, like a very, very essential tool these days. Everybody's educated on the role it plays and they're using it. And that's a foundational tool, according to me, for RevOps. There are specific tools that exist now, and with generative AI or AI in general, like there are some specific tools that are coming into market for functions that play a role in revenue. To me, there are some that I'm really excited about. One is AI's ability to forecast the pipeline. I just love that because it removes a lot of objectivity that has happened in the past in forecasting the pipe. Because before AI, the way we would forecast, we would be looking at the input in the CRM, and that would bring the subjectivity. So for example, Abhijit, if you're more optimistic than me, you might have a bigger conversion baked into your data, and your notes will also be way more optimistic than mine. but I'm just conservative. So that different personality of the sales team members will play into your forecasting target. AI actually kind of takes into account your past behavior. AI takes into account of some benchmarking, and then it gives you a more accurate forecast that you can then get like a more objective picture of how far are you from the target. And if you are exceeding the target, then should you up the target? So it just gives you a very good tool. I also like the personalization that AI is bringing into the entire process, because it just makes us better at serving customers, understanding their needs, customizing our messaging to them. And so those are two things that I'll put them on top of my list.
Personalization for sure, actually, not just in sales, but I believe in general, it's a game changer in terms of AI. Moving on to the next question, right? I believe staying on with the data and insights, can you share a couple of examples of effective use of data and insights generated from data revenue operations teams to help a data-driven approach?
Yeah. So one example that I gave earlier around new logos, I feel like I gave that from an enterprise and a startup perspective both. And that's an example that I believe that many listeners find it helpful, because we all struggle with how to drive more new logos or new customers. But RevOps can also help with some of the short-term objectives. So I'll give you an example. When I was at an e-commerce company, we had forecasted certain revenue for the year based on the boost that we had during COVID. But we realized that it was probably inflated in terms of our forecast. I think we were. So now we had a delta, a gap between where we were and what we needed to deliver within a year. Of course, one option is to just acknowledge the mistake in forecasting and say, missed it. But of course, we got to try, right? We got to try to see what we can gain from every possible area available to us. So we focused on that as part of the RevOps effort to say, this X million dollars that we have to figure out, where can we get that revenue from? So we looked at the data, we looked at some of the forecasting, which was for the next year, what we can pull in, what we can accelerate, what are the new things that we can try in with our partners or with our customers. Is there anything in pricing that we could do? Can we offer some perks to our customers kind of as an upsell? So there were many, many things that we put in place, and we were able to close a huge chunk of that gap. So that was kind of a very effective way of using RevOps. And I think I would say that anytime you must have a revenue target, okay, right? But anytime you have a target and you have an indication that you're going to miss it, put RevOps to good use. Just take that as a challenge and think about what you could do. And automatically, if you're new to RevOps, and it will automatically create certain processes which will become foundational to your organization. So I would rather start with problem solving rather than coming up with this big processes and just assuming that they're gonna work for you.
Got it. So one follow-up question on this, right? As a RevOps leader, do you foresee the RevOps team working very closely with the sales team, or it's in general cross-functional across the company?
Great question, Abhijit. It depends on how you're driving your business. So you must have heard about sales-led motion, product-led, marketing-led. If you are, and you can have multiple motions too, but if you are a sales-led company, sales does play a very big role into driving RevOps for the business, because you have the sellers who are selling on behalf of the company. So you have to do territory planning, you have to do quota assignment, you have to, again, like measure their effectiveness, and then you have to think about what they would need to be effective. So what does marketing need to do? And then once they have a customer, some people pass on the responsibility to customer success to do renewals, some keep it with the sales team. So depending on how your company is structured. But in any case, really just going back to that revenue cycle, get an understanding of how you're driving revenue today. Just jot down the current state. Like, don't think about what it should be tomorrow or what you think it should be. Just jot down what it is today. That will automatically tell you who is leading what part of your RevOps process. And then RevOps function should just support it along the way. Does that make sense?
That does. That was the prelude to my next question, actually, right? And as a startup founder, why should I be concerned about RevOps? Typically, what I've seen in startups is you don't have these silos problem as much as in an established enterprise. So, what do you feel as a startup founder? Why should I think about RevOps right from day zero or day one?
Yeah. So I do think that RevOps is a mindset that every startup should have. And you don't probably need a dedicated RevOps person, but having some tools that guide you on how your startup is getting to revenue. So for example, if you're sales led, you should invest in CRM and maybe have a consultant set it up for you, or you set it up yourself, but invest time in setting it up properly so you can measure your plan and progress. But I would also like to share an example, which is personal and which is related to my startup, which is not sales led, is product led and marketing led. So I'm co-founding ipick.ai, which is a generative AI powered stock research. And the problem that we are trying to solve is that if you are really figuring out what stocks to invest in today, maybe you go to tools like Yahoo Finance, Google Finance, or maybe even some subscription based tools, which just has tons of information. And we are in this day and age with ChatGPT and Perplexity, where we do not have to really spend that much time in reading every news, every link, every piece of content to make sense out of it. Like AI should be doing that work for us. So in ipick.ai, we just give you that concise news summary, which is based on news to tell you whether this is the right investment for you or not. So with that summary, you save a lot of time, which you can dedicate to making better decisions or doing more research. And today, where we are still in very early stages. So our goal right now is not revenue, so we don't need RevOps. But from a mindset perspective, our goal right now is to drive traffic to our platform and convert that traffic into registered users. So we use that mindset to then work backwards to say, okay, if we have a goal of reaching X many registered users, what does it mean in terms of traffic based on the performance we currently see? And where should we go to increase that traffic? And these are all hypotheses. For example, we now have presence on TikTok and LinkedIn and X, and we are reaching out to certain communities. We have no idea what would work because we have never done this for this particular product, but it just gives us a structure to try and give us that kind of that data and tools to see what's working versus not. So I encourage every startup to just think about what is that key metric for them at this particular time, and do they have a plan and a way to measure that plan to get to that metric.
So, yep, thanks a lot for having this discussion, Ruchi. Thanks. This has been fantastic.
Same here. Really enjoyed speaking to you, Abhijit. Thank you for having me.